Look at somebody and say, I'm covered by the blood. Say, I'm shielded. I'm protected. Say, I'm covered by the blood. It don't matter what comes my way. I'm covered by the blood of the Lamb. Whatever may come, He won't harm me. Whatever may come, He won't harm me. Lord, I am shielded. I'm shielded. Shielded. I'm gonna sing it one more time. Whatever comes my way, He won't harm me. Whatever the enemy throws my way, He says, He won't harm me. Lord, I am shielded. Shielded, I'm protected. I'm protected by the blood. This is the part I like. It says the blood of Jesus is covering. The blood of Jesus, yes, it's covering. The blood of Jesus, the blood of Jesus, it's still working. The blood of Jesus, the blood of Jesus, yes, yes, it's covering me. The blood of Jesus, it's still working. How many know the blood still works? Lord, I'm shielded. I'm shielded. Shielded. I'm protected by the blood. Can we do that one more time? The blood of Jesus. The blood of Jesus. Yes, it covers. Yes, it's covering. The blood of Jesus. The blood of Jesus. Yes, it's still working. One more time. The blood of Jesus. Yes, yes, it's covering. The blood of Jesus. The blood of Jesus. It's still working. Oh, Lord, I am shielded. I'm shielded. Shielded. I'm protected. I'm protected by the blood. Come on, let's say it one more time. For I'm shielded. Lord, I am shielded. I'm shielded. Shielded. I'm protected by the blood. That's the part y'all can clap your hands like this. If you're shielded and protected, let me say the blood. The blood is working. It's still working. It's still working right now. The blood is working. Can I get about 5 people to say the blood is working? The blood is working. It's still working. It's still working right now. The blood is working. The blood is working. It's still working. It's still working right now. The blood is working. He's covering me with the blood. Yeah. The blood is working. It's still working. It's still working right now. The blood is working. Get a couple of people to say the blood. The blood. Speak it over your family and say the blood. Speak it over your children and say the blood. Speak it over your lover and say the blood. Speak it over yourself and say the blood. I'm covered by the blood. The blood.
mop that floor. And Jesus, I slipped and I fell. And I slid from my room through the door into the hallway. And I lived by myself. And I hit that ground so hard. I didn't know what was going to happen. But you see, you missed the important part because I had a knife in my hand when I slipped. What the blood? Church today. So I'm grateful because I'm covered by the blood. Thank you, Jesus. Thank you, Jesus. Hallelujah. It could have been another way, God. Hallelujah. Hallelujah.
I am redeemed. I am redeemed. No more chains are holding me. I'm free. Help me, Maxine. No more chains. No more chains are holding me. I'm free. I'm free. Anybody glad about that this morning? Can we sing that one more time? Yeah. I am redeemed. I am redeemed. No more chains. No more chains are holding me. I'm free. Oh.
I'm sing this little bit for my mom. I am free. Praise the Lord. I'm free. No longer bound. No more chains holding me. My soul is resting. It's just a blessing. Praise the Lord.
Hallelujah. Let the redeemed of the Lord say so. Oh, let the redeemed. Of the Lord. Can we lift that up one more time, choir? Let the redeemed of the Lord say so. Say so. Say, I am redeemed. Say, so. The blood of Jesus said it made me whole, yeah. The blood of Jesus set my soul free, yeah. The blood, yeah. It gave me victory, yeah. So I am, eh. So I am, oh. Jesus set me free. Jesus set me free. He gave me victory, 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 victory. I The blood of Jesus. The blood of Jesus. Oh, the blood, oh, the blood, oh, the blood. Oh, the blood of Jesus. Victory, victory. Victory, victory. Anybody got victory this morning? Anybody got victory this morning? One more time, choir, one more time. Say, I am, I am. I am, I am. I am. I am, I am. I am. I am. One more time. I am. I am. I am.
Good afternoon and welcome to Delivering Democracy 2022. I am Dr. Lois Brown, Director of the Center for the Study of Race and Democracy here at Arizona State University. This year, we are honored to have with us our Delivering Democracy distinguished speaker, John Quinones, pioneering, intrepid, and accomplished broadcast journalist, producer, author, and architect of change. We are broadcasting live this afternoon from the beautiful sanctuary of Pilgrim Rest Baptist Church here in the heart of Phoenix. This year's program is virtual once again in order to ensure the health and well-being of our communities. Yet, as we have seen for the past 2 years, our live stream broadcasts have enabled us to build connections with individuals, with households, and communities across the nation and around the world. Next year, we hope to host this event as an in-person and live stream program. Wherever you are joining us from today, know that we are glad to have you with us. As always, our Delivering Democracy program features a mini concert with the gifted artists of the Pilgrim Rest Baptist Church Choir. We hope that you were able to enjoy the music ministry, and we give thanks to the choir for their songs of praise and uplift. Please join me now as we hear words of welcome from Dr. Terry Mackey, Senior Pastor of Pilgrim Rest Baptist Church, Kate Gallego, Mayor of our great city of Phoenix, and from Jose Esparza, Vice President Regulatory for Arizona Public Service, and Rob Taylor, Associate General Manager and Chief Public Affairs Executive of Salt River Project, who represent our generous and sustaining featured corporate sponsors.
Good day to you, my Arizona State University family. This year, I am proud to announce that Pilgrim Rest Baptist Church will celebrate its 100th anniversary. Yes! And one of the mantras that we continue to lift during this, our centennial year, this 100th year, is that we as a church want to keep it 100. That simply means we want to be authentic and we want to be genuine in our words and our actions as we continue to be a beacon of hope to our community and beyond. And as we partner with our Arizona State University family, we are given the plump, pleasing pleasure to unite in bringing forth this Delivering Democracy lecture, which helps and encourages us to stay true to our mission to be that beacon of hope. But we will never be that beacon of hope in its fullest extent if we discuss democracy and not deliver democracy. And we are waiting with tiptoe anticipation to hear from our featured speaker, John Quinones, as he would give us these timeless truths for the church, for Arizona State University, and all lovers of democracy, as we seek to be the change that we wish to see in the world. Once again, welcome to this Delivering Democracy lecture, and we pray God's speed upon you and yours. God bless.
Hello, I'm Phoenix Mayor Kate Gallego. Welcome to Delivering Democracy 2022. This annual event is one of the most important in our community. It takes on tough issues, but focuses on solutions. It comes at a time of great challenges, opportunities, and some celebrations. We need to continue to be vigilant about voting rights. We have to have a spotlight on Ukraine and the atrocities there. But we also need to celebrate, including the appointment of Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson. I want to thank the ASU Center for the Study of Race and Democracy for helping us navigate some of the most important issues that face not just Phoenix, but our entire country. Lois Brown and team, you hit it out of the park again. We have a real treat in store for us today. John Quinones has been in our living rooms for so long with his leadership position and willingness to take on tough subjects and really explore human motivation. I think we are going to have a fantastic dialogue today, thought-provoking, and perhaps one that will lead you towards some important civic engagement in the year to come. Thank you again for coming together for such an inspiring event.
Good afternoon. I'm Jose Esparza, Vice President of Regulatory at APS. I am proud today to represent APS, who has been a sponsor of the Delivering Democracy event since 2014. As circumstances would have it, we are virtual again this year. However, I want to acknowledge Dr. Lois Brown of the Center for the Study of Race and Democracy and Pastor Terry Mackey of Pilgrim Rest Baptist Church for their continued partnership and dedication to this endeavor. Welcome to what we can expect to be an impactful discussion. I personally am looking forward to hearing from our journalist and author, John Quinones. It was civil rights activist A. Philip Randolph who once said, "Equality is the heart and essence of democracy, freedom and justice, equality of opportunity in industry, in labor unions, schools and colleges, government, politics, and before the law." At APS, we believe in a promise that is committed to ensuring everyone has a place at the table. We are part of the fabric of this community, but we are just one thread. It is the people of the state and its public and private institutions, neighborhoods, houses of worship, nonprofits, each of us woven together, working cooperatively in a spirit of understanding that makes up the strong fabric that is our larger community. It requires all of us to keep our state and our democracy strong. At APS, we believe strongly that we have a responsibility, more than simply providing power to our customers. We have a commitment to step outside of the energy space and provide for those who work in the nonprofit and educational space to better the community at large. This is why we are here today, sponsoring this event. On behalf of APS, I thank ASU, Go Devils, and the Center for allowing us to partner with them along with the exploration of issues of race and democracy. Diversity and inclusion is more than a policy or a program. It is the heart of the community. Thank you all for joining us today, for allowing APS to once again be part of this inspiring dialogue.
Hello, I'm Rob Taylor, Associate General Manager and Chief Public Affairs Executive at SRP. We applaud ASU and the Center for the Study of Race and Democracy for providing this forum for an open and honest dialogue on a subject that gets to the heart of who we are as a nation and who we want to be. Conversation and communication about tough issues, no matter how uncomfortable, are essential to the health of our democracy. That's why this type of event is so important. As the center states, this is intended to be a safe and inclusive space where our voices can be heard, and just as important, where we can listen. I want to personally thank Dr. Lois Brown for her commitment to addressing these difficult issues. Her leadership has been invaluable in advancing the goals of the center. I look forward to hearing the thoughts and perspectives of our distinguished speaker, John Quinones. All of us at SRP greatly value our ongoing partnership with ASU, and we're proud to support the center and today's discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mackey, Mayor Gallego, Jose Esparza of APS, and Rob Taylor of the Salt River Project. I would like to add my thanks to Arizona Public Service, led by CEO Jeff Gouldner, and SRP, led by CEO Mike Hummel, have been steady and generous featured sponsors of Delivering Democracy. Now more than ever, we thank you for your commitment to community engagement, to dialogue that increases our understanding of the issues that shape our future, that illuminate our past, and help us to make the most of our present. The campus of Arizona State University is built on the ancestral lands of the Acamel O'odham people and the Maricopa people. We acknowledge the fraught histories of dispossession and loss that still inform the lives and lands of Indigenous people here in our state and across the nation. We recognize that acknowledgement is but a first step, and that our awareness of place and its layered histories should propel us all towards deeper engagement with issues of justice, honor, integrity, and kindness. Thank you, President Crow, Provost Gonzalez, and Vice Provost Lopez for your support and leadership during these times of seemingly perpetual challenge in our world. We are both deeply too by our CSRD Advisory Board, led by Board Chair Carol Coles-Henry, and that includes members Judge Carol Berry, Connie Robinson, Julia Patrick, Judge Roxanne Song-Ong, Professor Alberto Rios, Dr. Roy Janish, Dr. Rufus Glasper, and Veda Manager. Pastor Mackey, Elder Yarbo, Brother Anthony, and Sister Stewart of Pilgrim Rest Baptist Church, thank you for welcoming us back again this year and for all that you do to ensure the success of delivering democracy each and every year. Finally, I'd like to thank our gifted CSRD team, Debbie Richmond, Teresa Morales, and Victoria Cervantes, who have done so much and always with such good cheer en route to our 9th Delivering Democracy program today. Thanks too to Professor James Wormers and to Jim Salisbury for their live stream and technical support. And a final word to our talented graphic design assistants, Alex Minato and Satya, and our program and office assistants, Isabella Escobar, Lauren Kuhlman, and our soundtrack consultant, James Richmond Jr. They have all enriched our programming immensely. Our interns, Katie Duro, Adriana Gonzalez Chavez, Dayara Leva, Ji Hui Kang, Vanessa Cooper, and Basil Ribakari have ensured the success of our Delivering Democracy Virtual Community Resource Fair. Our individual and organizational sponsors continue to inspire us with their solidarity and their generosity. So we invite all of you who are tuning in to head to our CSRD website after the broadcast to learn more about the phenomenal community organizations from and beyond Arizona who are participating in this year's virtual fair. Excited today that our audience spans the globe and the nation. We are linked from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania to Johannesburg, South Africa. We welcome viewers from Indonesia, and we thank all of you tuning in from Arizona, Colorado, Michigan, Virginia, Illinois, Texas, California, Iowa, just to name a few. So at this time, I would like to welcome to our Delivering Democracy 2022, our distinguished speaker, Mr. John Quinones.
Hi there, Dr.
Welcome. Welcome, welcome. It is so very good to be with you on this day.
Thank you. It's an honor to be with you. I just wish I could be there in person, but what a wonderful summit you're holding here. You know, delivering democracy. That's what it's all about. So
indeed it is. Thank you. So I want to start with a question about education. That is so much at the heart of your story and what we hear you telling and encouraging so many of us. And here at Arizona State University, almost 40% of our students are first generation college students. And we know that behind each of them, there is a family and a community with so much hope and perhaps some dread apprehension as well. So I wonder if we might begin our conversation about democracy by thinking about education and the journey that you and your family made and how that has impacted your sense of who you could be in America.
You know, how can there be a democracy without education? You know, I grew up on the west side of San Antonio in the barrio, in a very poor community. My father was a janitor. My mom used to clean houses on the rich part of town. They spoke very little English because they had to drop out of the 3rd and 4th grade to help support their families. My father picked cotton in South Texas, and my mother also had to drop out of the 4th grade to help support her family. So none of us spoke English, even though my family has been in Texas for like 5, 6 generations. We've been here hundreds of years. I get a kick out of people coming up to me sometimes and saying, John Quinones, you're Mexican American. When did you cross the border and come to America? It's like, we were always here. I tell them, I didn't cross the border crossed me. I mean, Texas was once part of Mexico and part of Spain many years ago, and so was California, Nevada, Arizona, Utah, parts of Wyoming, Colorado, even the names are in Spanish. But some people forget all that. I had a dream as a kid to be, I would listen to a little transistor radio, and I would listen to these announcers bringing us the news from all over the world. And I dreamed of someday being on the air like that. And lo and behold, the dream came true, but it was only because my parents kept pushing me, even though they had never been exposed to much education, as I mentioned. They instilled in me that sense that it didn't matter what side of the tracks I was born in, that I was just as worthy as everyone else. I tell the story all the time about how when I went to the 1st grade, you know, at 10 o'clock in the morning, I didn't know what the teacher was saying. It was recess time, but I didn't know that. So at first day of the 1st grade in class, at Mrs. Gregory's class, 10 o'clock in the morning, the doorbell, the school bell rings, everyone goes out to the playground, right? Where does little Juanito Quinones go? I walked home. I lived a block away from Carvajal Elementary. And I remember going in through my front door and my dear mother Maria going, Juanito, ¿qué pasó? What happened? And I said to her, Se acabó. It's over, Mom. I like school. 2 hours and you're done. This is going to work out very nicely. Well, she grabbed me by the ear and dragged me back to Mrs. Gregory's class because she knew the value of an education, not ever having gotten one herself. You know, when I was 13 years old, my father was laid off from work. And we did what a lot of Latino families in South Texas had to do back then. We became migrant farm workers. My two sisters, my mother and my father and I journeyed 1,700 miles in the back of these trucks with strangers, people we didn't know, all the way to Northport, Michigan, the cherry capital of the world, where we picked cherries. And I remember teetering on the top of these ladders, you know, overlooking orchards and orchards of cherry trees. And it would pay us 75 cents per bucket. We had a bucket strapped around our neck. 75 cents per bucket. And it would take me 2 hours to fill that darn bucket with cherries. 75 cents for 2 hours of work. And then we did that for 6 or 7 weeks. And we then did what all migrant farm workers do. We followed the crops down to Ohio, a little town called Swanton outside of Toledo, Ohio, where we picked tomatoes for 35 cents a bushel. And, you know, man, I was a champion tomato picker. I would do 100 bushels a day. For 35 cents, that's $35 a day, right? And my father would do 120 bushels, and my mother would contribute, and my sisters would contribute. And we learned the value of the family coming together in times of difficulty and pulling ourselves up by our bootstraps. But I'll never forget being on my knees on the cold, hard ground at 6 in the morning, looking at a row of tomato plants that for a young 13-year-old boy's eyes seemed to go on for miles and miles. That's what I had to look forward to that day. And my father, Bruno, saying, Juanito, do you want to do this kind of work for the rest of your life, or do you want to get a college education someday? It was a no-brainer. I knew that I didn't want to do that kind of back-breaking work for the rest of my life, but no one believed in me. When I came back to school, I would ask my teachers, how do I prepare for the ACTs or the SATs? How do I take advanced placement classes in math, biology, and English? My own teachers would look at me and say, John, it's wonderful that you have this dream, the sueño, this dream of someday being a television reporter, but no one in your family's ever gone to college. Your family doesn't have much money. Your dad's a janitor. What gives you the audacity to think that you would make it in college? We think, my teachers would say, we think you should try wood shop or metal shop or auto mechanics. Not that there's anything wrong with those great trades. I have a lot of friends and relatives who do that kind of hard work and make a good living, but I wanted to go to college. And my own teachers and my own counselors would do what people do on that TV show, What Would You Do? Every Friday night, they judged me by the color of my skin and the accent in my voice. But thank God for my mother, Maria. And she was the one who kept pushing and motivating. And she would say, Mijo, it doesn't matter that you have to wear the same clothes to school every other day. At least we wash them, right? They're clean. She would say, it doesn't matter that you have to take bean and refried bean tortillas and tacos for lunch when all the other kids are taking their fancy bologna and white bread. She would say, it doesn't matter. What matters is what's in here, in your cabeza, in your brain, and what's in here, in your corazón. You know, it was during the civil rights movement back in the 60s and 70s. And I remembered the words of Martin Luther King, who once said that in times of adversity, you got to have faith. And faith is taking that first step. It doesn't matter if you can't see the entire staircase, just take that first step, because tomorrow there'll be another step, right? And the next day, another baby step. My first step was trying to get rid of my Mexican accent, because I know I'd never make it in television. If I said, these are my shoes, this is my shirt, that's how I spoke. There is no SH sound in Spanish. So that was my first step. And then Upward Bound, this wonderful government program came along. I went to be interviewed by them. For some reason, they saw a spark in my eye, and because I didn't have great grades, I was one of the Upward Bound students, this program that the government had to help kids from the inner city get to college. That made it happen for me. I wound up getting a master's in journalism at Columbia University. Who would have thought? But it was because I pursued that dream and because my parents instilled in me that yearning to get that education. So education, it means everything to me.
One of the things that comes across so profoundly is the insult of lower expectations, the damage that teachers began to do to you when they said you have the audacity to dream. I wonder if you could think with us about what you would say now to those individuals, because we do know that such stereotype and tracking still occurs in our educational systems, and that resources are not always distributed in equal ways. And so in that sense, that insidious tracking and curtailing of dreams, if you will, continues. What would you say now to those teachers who were on the wrong side of the dream?
The angry John Quinones would say, how dare you? How dare you have such low expectations and judge me by the fact that my parents weren't able to afford to educate themselves and that their parents couldn't do it? How dare you think, what gives you the audacity to think that I don't have it within me? That's what I would say to them. And I would hope that, and I know it still happens today, and I carry this campaign every time I visit any city and any school and any university to try to impress upon professors, but even teachers in elementary school to listen to their kids, to see them as individuals, right? To not paint them by the same paintbrush and believe that they can't do it simply because those people haven't had a history of doing it well. It's because those people haven't had opportunities. And when you beat them down like that, they have low expectations of themselves. It's criminal almost, in my opinion, when they do that.
Mm-hmm. I wonder if you would, I think you're underscoring the real power of inclusion, that it is not just about the masses or great numbers, but it is down to the individual level. Wonder if you could think with us about the power and the possibilities of inclusion. What becomes possible when there is more justice and inclusion?
We all do a better job of, in my case, reporting the news. The stories that ABC News has been, the awards, the 7 National Emmy Awards that I've helped bring this company, ABC News, those kinds of stories might have never happened if they didn't have a Latino correspondent who understood the culture in Latin America and in Cuba and Mexico and Argentina and El Salvador and Nicaragua. If I didn't speak that other language, Espanol, if I didn't look the way I do, and if I wasn't able to go into places where perhaps another reporter might have had difficulty getting, they wouldn't, the network wouldn't have been able to get the stories that they got, and America wouldn't have been able to receive the stories and be educated themselves with my perspective on covering those stories. When I started working for ABC, I worked for Peter Jennings, who was this great anchorman at ABC back in the 80s. And when I was first hired, I was hired to cover Latin America because the person who was reporting in Latin America before me was shot and killed on camera because he couldn't communicate in Spanish with the soldiers in Nicaragua. His name was Bill Stewart. I was hired to cover Central America. I was a young reporter right out of Chicago, where had been a local reporter for the CBS station there. And I remembered one of my first stories in Nicaragua was an exclusive interview with the president of Nicaragua, a man named Daniel Ortega, who, by the way, is the president again today in Nicaragua. But back then he was a young revolutionary. He had been, they had taken power in Nicaragua. Getting an interview with him was a big deal. I was able to swing that interview. I called New York. I got Peter Jennings on the phone. He's in New York. I'm in Nicaragua. I tell him, Peter, I've got this exclusive interview with Daniel Ortega. And he said, fine, young man. I don't think he knew my name. He said, fine, young man. I look forward to having you on World News Tonight. Well, I hang up the phone with Peter and the phone rings again, and it's the president's office in Nicaragua canceling my interview. And now I'm shaking in my boots. I'm a rookie reporter, and I got to tell Peter Jennings that the story that I just promised to him is not going to happen after all. So I called New York, and I expect to be fired or yelled at least by Peter Jennings, because he was very intimidating, this great anchorman that he was. He passed away about 13 years ago, and we still miss him at ABC. But when I got him on the phone and I explained, I said, Peter, you know, it's not going to happen. They backed out of doing my interview, and I'm so sorry. And he said, young man, this is going to happen to you again in your career, where someone promises you something that they can't deliver. He said, listen to me. He said, don't worry so much about talking to the movers and shakers of the world. You know, people who are politicians, the presidents of countries, presidents of corporations. When those people want to get their message out, they can gather the press, right, and issue a press release. They can talk to any. They have the access to the media. Don't worry, he said, so much about talking to the movers and shakers. Talk instead to the moved and the shaken. In other words, go into the countryside, young man, he said, because you're Latino. You can go into places that I can't go in as Peter Jennings. Even I can't do that with all my years of experience, he said. You can go and interview the real victims of war, the real victims of natural disasters and mudslides and earthquakes, with your ability to speak the language, because you look like you do, because you understand the mannerisms, you understand the customs. You can get story, you can give a voice to people who don't have a voice. Talk to the moved and the shaken. And that's all I did for the next 15 years, running around Latin America. But my point is, because of the inclusion, because ABC had the foresight, and maybe it was because they needed it, because they wanted to cover the news and they weren't able to cover it. Maybe it was a selfish interest. The bottom line is, when they started hiring people like me, we did a better job of bringing news to America. And that works in every corporation. You know, you'll do a better job of reaching that audience, whether you're selling, you know, washing machines or cars. If you can have someone on your team who connects with that audience, it's better for the entire world, really.
That is such a set of compelling stories. And on the heels of thinking about how you took the place of someone who did not know the language and paid an ultimate price, and then the ways in which inclusion actually expands the world, makes it bigger for each and every one of us.
Absolutely.
I want to come back to the idea of land, because that is something that that is so central to who you have been as a journalist, and the kind of commitment you've had to finding the moved and the shaken. And so often the stories that you bring us from the land, from the farms, from the sugarcane fields of the Dominican Republic, they are just wrenching stories. And I wonder if you could just share with us a little bit about how you've seen the connection between race and labor evolve over the arc of your career, because it began for you and your family at a moment of crisis and economic vulnerability, your father losing his job and the family now having to rally together. And then, you know, there are more people enslaved in the world today than ever before. And so much of that is tied to land and consumption. So would welcome your thoughts about race and land and how those are so intertwined.
It's, you know, racism exists. There's no way to get around it. The darkest people in countries around the globe are those who suffer the most. You go to Mexico, you know, my motherland, if you will. I'm American, right? But my ancestors came from Spain and Mexico. We're mestizos. And the people who gain power there in politics and in much of Latin America are not the dark-skinned Native American types, usually. They're, you know, light-skinned, you know, European descendants. And that seems to be the case in too many places around the globe. And land, of course, those are those without land, people of color. I did a story, and you mentioned the sugarcane harvesters in Haiti and the Dominican Republic. Haiti and the Dominican Republic share an island. And on one side is Haiti, one of the poorest countries in the Western Hemisphere. And the other side is the Dominican Republic, a wealthy land because of tourism, and their beautiful beaches, and sugarcane, and agriculture. And we had heard that the Dominican military was kidnapping young men in Haiti and promising them jobs in across the border in the Dominican Republic, and that in the end they wind up taking them by force. Some of them as young as 6, 7, 8 years old, children who then are forced to work on sugarcane plantations, sugar that we as American consumers wind up buying, not knowing, or at least this was the case when I did the story 30 years ago, not knowing that it was being harvested by modern day slaves. They would get paid $3 a day, these children, to work in the fields from 6 in the morning to 6 at night, watched over by men with guns on horseback. It was one of the most, enlightening stories I've ever done. And very few of us knew that this existed. I mean, we had suspicions, right? And we wind up really blowing that story out of the water and shining a light on the companies that were buying that sugar and exposing them for what they were, and interviewing, the company officials in New York about it. It was one of the most heartbreaking stories. And then it was, again, in part because I could go into the Dominican Republic and speak the language. And my producer, by the way, also is Latino, and the cameraman was, and the sound man was. And just because of that, we were able to communicate and investigate and research and convince people to talk to us. We didn't seem so intimidating. But that whole issue is just a small example of how, racism and race is tied to land, and those who have, continue to get more, and those who don't get less and less.
So I wonder, how do you leave a story like that? You bring it into land, you file that report, but it must impact you deeply. How do you recover?
By thinking of the greater good that will come from it. Yes, it's painful for me to sit there, and sometimes we're in tears and the cameraman's in tears. Sometimes we feel like we go into a place, we interview folks, and then we leave, and they stay in the same boat that they were in. The payment for us is that we wind up, exposing it, right? And that a greater good will come if we expose that. One of the other stories, after we did that story, the children were rescued by the Catholic Church in Haiti, had a caravan of trucks go into the Dominican Republic and pull all those children out of the sugarcane plantations and rescue them. We did a story in Colombia about children who lived in the sewer systems of that country. I was there covering another story about the presidential elections in Colombia, but that story didn't turn out to be much. But while I was in my hotel room, I would look out my window at night, and I saw these children running around, again, 7, 8, 9, 10 years old, sniffing glue. They had glue on their shirt sleeves or their jacket sleeves. It was cold, and they would inhale it to stay warm. And then at night, I would see them open the manhole covers on the streets of Bogota, the capital of Colombia, and they would climb down there into the sewers. So I asked the woman who worked for ABC in Bogota, I said, who are those kids? What are they doing? She goes, well, they're not good kids. They're little criminals. They steal by day. They steal watches and necklaces from people, but they're homeless children, runaways, castaways, children nobody wants, and they live in the sewer systems of Bogota. And I couldn't believe it. And that's why they're climbing into the manhole covers and then close the manhole covers above them, right? And I said, isn't anyone trying to help them? The police, the military? She said, oh man, the police, they want to clean up the streets of Bogota. So they want to get these kids off the streets, but they're afraid to go down into the sewer systems of the city. Can you imagine the rivers of waste of 30 million people? They're afraid to go down there because the kids control that dark world. There's 300 of them, by the way, 300 kids. And the police and the military are afraid of all the disease that festers along the rivers of waste underneath Bogota. So they don't go down there. They don't chase them down. But what they do is they open the manhole covers, they pour gasoline down there, and they throw a match to burn them out. And there's one man, his name is Jaime Jaramillo, He's a wealthy industrialist who finds oil for American oil companies in Latin America, and he's trying to do what he can. So he goes down there. He travels throughout Latin America, but at night when he comes home, he can't rest. He can't sleep, knowing that there are children who live in these conditions, right? He's Colombian. So he grabs a bucket of chicken, a loaf of bread, a 6-pack of Cokes, and he goes down into the sewer systems and he does what he can to feed those kids, and they love him, they trust him. He's the only one, they recognize his voice, and he has a little flashlight and he does what he can. He's trying to open up an orphanage for them, but he doesn't have enough money. So I had to meet this man, right? So we go to his house and he shows me an album full of photographs of children that he has rescued from the sewer, some of them with their faces melted from the fires that the police and the military had started. So I called New York. I wasn't one of the primetime live correspondents. That was a fancy news magazine. I was just a regular general assignment reporter. But I knew that this story was more than a 2-minute piece on the evening news. I knew this was more like a 20-minute piece, like a news magazine, you know, like 2020 and this new show, Primetime Live. I called the producer of that show, hoping that he would listen to me and let me stay and do the story, and he did. Thank God. Rick Kaplan was his name. He said, "Fine, John, who's going to go down in the sewers?" I said, "I am and my crew. We want to do the story." And he said, "If you're crazy enough to want to do this, then you know, knock your socks off. Spend as much time as you have doing the story." Well, we spent 2 weeks down there with the kids in the sewers. And I met a 17-year-old girl who had just given birth to it. Can you imagine giving birth to a baby in the sewer systems? Well, back to your original question, how do I get over the misery of having to cover these difficult stories? We brought the story back to New York. We spent a few weeks putting it all together, writing it and editing it. And the day after it aired on ABC's Primetime Live with Diane Sawyer and Sam Donaldson, the American viewers, like many of the people watching right now, sent in $1 million in donations to the kids. They call them los niños de los Andes, the children of the Andes, and to this man, Jaime Jaramillo, who was then able, with those $1 million, to buy some property and open up an orphanage for these kids. And all of them were pulled out of the sewers. So yes, it's miserable in the moment for me to be interviewing folks and to feel almost guilty. I remember we were wearing masks and overalls and boots and hats. And meanwhile, the kids are barefoot in shorts with no shirts on. Yes, you feel guilty from doing that, but by exposing it, by shining a light on it, it can make all the difference in the world. I mean, I see journalism as the candle in the darkness. Imagine you're in a room and it's pitch dark, right? There's been a horrible storm, the doors are locked. We can't see our hands in front of our faces. Well, the journalist, he or she, is the person with the little candle or the little flashlight, and they can shine it on the darkest corners of the room to illuminate injustice, to illuminate corruption, to illuminate human rights violations and civil rights violations. I think when journalism is done right, those are the kinds of stories that we should be telling. And that's what I've endeavored to do all these years.
And this is why we love you. I will just say that. Why so many are absolutely in awe of you and cherish your dedication and your heart.
Thank you.
On a related topic, journalists themselves are under siege. They are in danger when they report on stories, just as you say, when they go to shine the light in the darkness. And the statistics are really quite striking. Right, in 2020, in a 10-year period, there were 2,500 journalists killed. The 5 deadliest places to be a journalist: Iraq, Mexico, the Philippines, Pakistan, and India, and over 200 journalists imprisoned around the world as of 2020. And some of them, as we know, do not make it home, right? What is it you think, especially now as we know that civil wars are raging around the world, invasions are happening in Ukraine and other places, what is it that we who are where we are, away from those sites of conflict, what is it that we need to know about the work that journalists are doing, that really life-threatening work? How do we more fully and deliberately hear and see what it is that they are doing?
I mean, the simplest thing you can do is just pay attention and to what we're bringing back to you, to the information that we're offering up, and that they are, those particularly in combat zones. And don't be so quick to ridicule and criticize and call it fake news, you know, when we're trying to just do our job and do the best we can to illuminate again, to shine that light that I speak about. That's all. I mean, the fact is, we're gonna do our best to without journalism, there is no democracy. That's all we're trying to do. You know, we're just trying to find the nuggets of truth in these stories. And no, not all of us are you know, have to do it perfectly. You know, many of us stumble sometimes. But by and large, especially those that are out there right now, covering these stories in such violent places, are simply trying to bring back information that'll help our country and that'll help their countries and that'll help the world. When I was in Panama, we covered the invasion of Panama back in 1989. It was called Operation Just Cause. The US government was going after a man named Manuel Noriega, who was the president and a dictator, military dictator in Panama. When we went in, we snuck into the country, and the next day the invasion happened, and Noriega's military forces started kidnapping journalists from the hotel that we were staying at in Panama, and they took my producer, Robert Campos, Latino. We were both based in Miami. He was kept overnight in a dungeon, and they were threatening to kill him. His wife was calling me. She was pregnant in Miami, saying, "You're going to rescue him, right? You're going to get him back, right, John? You're going to get him back." I didn't know where he was. I mean, we did all we could. I remember I was even on the air talking about it incessantly. And Peter Jennings was on the other end of the phone. I was going live from Panama. He's in New York. They later wound up going down to Panama themselves. But at one point he said, you know, "Young man, you got to stop talking about our own producer being kidnapped." And he was one of my best friends. And so of course I was very worried about him. But Peter Jennings had a point. He said, "Look, there are American military, there's soldiers right now whose lives also are at risk. In fact, they're invading that country and they're under attack. So, you know, let's not make it so self-serving." And he was right. But the fact is, I mean, just as viewers, just show a little respect, you know, try to understand that we're trying to make this world a better place. I think if you scratch any reporter on the skin, underneath that, you'll find a reformer, you know, someone who wants to make the world a better place. And that's why sometimes we find ourselves in places of danger.
If we think about where we are in the Southwest, and we think about how deeply the border is on our minds, and you have said some heroes have to cross borders in order to make change. And I wonder if we could spend a little time thinking about real and symbolic borders as well. One of the most gripping stories that we have a hint of is about you when you were based in Chicago and you decided to head south and then make your return to Chicago. You went undercover, you took on various identities. I wonder if you could tell us a smidge about that story and that experience, but more about about the how you made this story, because not all of us get to actually immerse ourselves in the moment, as it were. Sometimes we seek out the facts, and part of your work that has just been so significant is the way in which you immerse yourself. You become one with the story. Could you take us back to that? Because it did lead to Emmy Awards and it was intrepid.
No, thank you, Dr. Brown. It was a story that I had wanted to do for a long time about an issue that's still a hot button political issue today: illegal immigration. Right? I wanted to know. My family's been here legally in Texas for decades, but I know I had relatives who came over, crossed over from Mexico illegal or Guatemala, I wanted to know, what are the push factors? You know, we all hear about the Border Patrol crackdowns, we all hear about the wall, but what are the push factors that make someone so desperate to leave their homeland, leaving their mother, their daughters, their boyfriend, their girlfriends, their wives, their children behind, to come here looking for a better life, you know, chasing that American dream? How bad must it be? So I convinced my news director, I was a local reporter for the CBS station in Chicago and WBBM, and I convinced my boss, my news director, to let me go down to Mexico and go undercover. And because I look the way I do, because I'm Mexican American, right? I would speak only Spanish. I would go undercover and pretend to be just another young man trying to come illegally into the US, right? So God bless him, my boss said, okay, it's not cheap to do these things. You know, you got to send a camera crew down to Mexico and the reporter and hotels and airfare and all that. And it was a local station. It wasn't a network news operation. But thank God, he said, I love the idea and be careful and, you know, Godspeed. So a producer and I and a camera crew went to Mexico. We went to this little town where half of the working age men had already left that town. It was basically all women in this town to find work, and they were working, and then they would send money to help support their families back in Mexico. And it was there that I found a coyote. I pretended that I was just another young Mexican. I spoke only Spanish, and I dressed down. Of course, I looked like just a typical immigrant, and I was 27 years old. And I found a coyote, a smuggler, who for $300 promised me to bring me across the border into the US. He sold me a fake birth certificate and a fake social security card. And he said, okay, young man, tonight, in Spanish, of course, tonight we'll go down to the border, meet me down there, and I'll put you in an inner tube and you'll float across the Rio Grande. Fantastic. And it's all captured on hidden camera, right? He had no idea I was a reporter. I went across the border. Back then you could go back and forth the Texas-Mexico border very easily. And I told my camera crew where to hide in the bushes, go back to Mexico, and I meet up with the coyote. And then he at 7 o'clock at night, as promised, on the banks of the Rio Grande, he puts me on an inner tube. I gave him the $300, and he pushes me across the Rio Grande to Laredo, Texas. And thank God he was a decent coyote, right? Because these people often will know that immigrants have saved their lives for this border crossing. They're carrying all the money they can muster. They'll rip them off, they'll rob them, you know, beat them up, leave their bodies in the Rio Grande or in the desert in Arizona. And who's gonna care? They were doing something illegal anyway, right? Every day, bodies wash up in the Rio Grande or in the desert there in southern Arizona. In fact, I'm doing a story right now on Nightline that it's all about rescuing immigrants who are crossing what they call the Devil's Highway down in southern Arizona. It'll be on Nightline in a few weeks. But anyway, I did that. I told the camera crew, he puts me on an inner tube. I float across the Rio Grande, all captured on hidden camera. And I didn't stop there. I got on a bus and I went to Chicago, because this was, remember, for a station in Chicago. So we wanted to make it of local interest. And I wanted to show that the problem touches Chicago, right? Because there's a vibrant, you know, large Latino community in Chicago. And I found a job at a restaurant where we had heard that the owner of this restaurant had 7 undocumented workers working for him, and he had not paid them in 17 weeks. And every time they complained, he would say, hey guys, you get to work, you get to eat here, you get to eat all the food you want, you get to sleep here in the basement at the restaurant. You keep complaining, I'll call immigration and have you deported. And by the way, that happens in this country today. So I go there pretending still undercover, pretending that I just arrived from Mexico. And I got a job at that restaurant on the outskirts of Chicago. And by day, I'm a dishwasher, right? And bussing tables. And then at night, I slept with the other 7 Mexican workers in the basement of that restaurant. And I still wonder what they must have thought, because by day, I'm speaking only Spanish. Again, they thought I just arrived from Mexico. By day, I'm washing dishes and bussing tables. And then in the middle of the night, I pulled out a little camera and I started interviewing them about their lives in Spanish, next to the dishes and cans of food and silverware in the basement where they lived. And they told me through tears how they were being held as virtual indentured servants there at that restaurant by this man who had not paid them a penny in 17 weeks. Well, the next day I came back to work, this time wearing a suit, speaking fluent English with a camera crew behind me. And I remember we had to chase the owner of that restaurant through the parking lot because he didn't want to talk to me about what he was doing to those men. But the day after it aired on CBS television in Chicago, the story of me crossing the Rio Grande and then me working at that restaurant, the day after it aired, the US government moved in. They shut down the restaurant, they arrested the owner, and they got the Mexican workers the money they were owed and temporary visas to remain in this country while they worked at their residency. And I knew then that those were the kinds of stories, you talk about the importance of inclusion, right, and diversity. Those are the kinds of stories that I, as a Latino reporter, could tell perhaps better than someone else.
I think
And that got me my job at ABC. That story won an Emmy Award and it got me to ABC News in New York. And I wound up going to Central America, based in Miami. But it was because of that story. And you know, it's still happening today. And I would love to swim across the Rio Grande today. I don't think ABC would allow me to though.
so. Part of what's so compelling about the stories that you tell is the proximity that you have to the events in front of you, right? And we know the summer of 2020, this nation was undone by the cell phone footage made by a 17-year-old in Minneapolis who stood there with a younger cousin and filmed the death of George Floyd. Social media has changed the ways in which stories get told, and what we see and how fast we see it. And as you think about the generations of young journalists coming up, as you think about just young people, no matter what their interests, everyone has access to or is close to someone with a camera. How do you see our news and our engagement and our documentation of the world, the chaos and the injustice? How do you see it changing? And what would you encourage people to do to make their footage and their just to make their footage and their representations of the world around them mean even more?
Well, it's good and bad, right? In many ways, it's wonderful that we all have these things, you know, to document when we see something going on. In fact, many of the stories, the ideas that we get from my show, What Would You Do, which is about, you know, ethics and morals, we simply watch what's going viral on the internet, you know, and on social media. In many ways, journalists don't have to, you know, networks don't have to spend as much money as they used to sending me with a whole camera team and editors, and it was very expensive. Sometimes we'd have to charter planes to go cover the story. Now the equipment is so small and convenient and so good. I mean, the quality of these small, tiny cameras is fabulous. So all of that is good. Citizen journalists, though, I mean, and again, much of what you see on the news is captured by some, you know, passerby who just happened to be rolling on his phone. Thank God for that. But we also have to consider the source. It's a little dangerous. It's a two-edged sword here because, you know, we don't know for certain that material that we're watching that was captured by someone is real or honest. How do you know? I know we have, you know, strict regulations at ABC News to consider the source of any video that we get and confirm the material long before lawyers get involved and ethics people, standards people at ABC News, and the same thing at CBS and NBC before it gets on the air. But, you know, in the end, I think it's wonderful that we have access to it. we just have to be very careful, you as a consumer of news, to consider the source. Where is that coming from? And because anyone can pretend now to be a journalist and a cameraman with their phone, and we have to be very careful what we believe about what's being delivered to us that way.
So I have a couple of questions from viewers. One is from Haley, who writes, as a journalist and a communicator in today's world, I often fear I'm not doing enough to preserve democracy. What can journalists do or focus on to help keep democracy alive and thriving in 2022?
We got to keep pitching those stories that even our bosses sometimes don't want to hear or to see. I consider myself blessed as a journalist because I will tackle issues that a lot of people don't want to hear about. You know, a lot of people don't want to read about or watch on television. And sometimes it takes some convincing of even my own bosses, because I'm so close to certain stories that thank God they're listening, and thank God I have experience now, and I've got all these years at ABC to have earned a little bit of respect, at least, you know, and I don't always get to do the stories that I want to do, but I think that's the key. Keep pitching away and keep looking for those stories that are being ignored, especially in communities of color, especially in the barrios of San Antonio and Phoenix, Arizona, and Tucson, and Black communities in this country where, again, the people don't have access and people aren't given a voice, where the moved and the shaken, you know, live. It just takes pushing and not forgetting to keep, you know, trying to sell those stories and bring them to fruition. There are days where I feel like I'm not doing enough myself. There's a story right now on that Latino woman who is on death row, convicted of killing her child. And I think she's got days left. And now there are real questions as to whether she did that. I know the Kardashians, for example, have gotten involved, and it's getting a lot of exposure, and rightfully so. But I'm kicking myself. I should have been doing that story. You know, it's a story about a Latina. I was busy doing the immigration story. I can't do them all, but yeah, it's only natural to think that we're not doing enough. But the world is changing, and I think in news management, certainly at ABC, we now have people in positions of power who are sensitive to hearing our stories. The new president of ABC News is a woman named Kim Godwin. She's African American, Godwin, and she's fabulous. She came to us from CBS. She's worked all over the country. Just a tremendous journalist and a tremendous manager and a tremendous boss. We now have a real person who can listen to my ideas more than ever before, and to the ideas of everyone else. And by the way, ABC has, you know, so many now reporters and producers of color working for us. Now we're working toward getting people in management positions, people who sign those stories to us, also to reflect the makeup of the mosaic of this wonderful country of ours.
So I have for you a closing question, and it's one that really invokes the very phrase delivering democracy. Our center is really committed to programming that matters, that's intentional, and that involves calls to action. As I think Rob Taylor says, not enough to discuss, but one has to truly forge ahead. And it's not enough to discuss and deliver democracy. That's what Pastor Mackey said. And Rob Taylor mentioned we have to get to the subject of who we are and want to be. So this is about democracy. In addition to the question, what would you do, which you have trademarked so gloriously, what is one essential question that you challenge our audience, our viewers, to ask themselves in order to be everyday heroes and heroes every day?
What can I do to help those with the least? To help those who live on the margins of society? That's it. I have learned from all these years of doing What Would You Do? And we've done it for 14 years. We're hoping to get it back on the air soon. We couldn't do it because of COVID, but ABC says they want it back, and I'm looking forward because this country needs it right now more than ever. And people are making, you're right, racism exists and discrimination exists, and it even affects, you know, here I am, me personally, here I am, I think I'm a famous television reporter. You know, the other day I was at an airport, you know, getting ready to get on a flight to New York. I was lucky enough to be flying in first class. So I'm standing in the first class line about to board the plane underneath the first class sign. I look to my left, all the other first class passengers by mistake have lined up in the economy line. That happens, I was in the right place. But as I'm standing there, and I was wearing a baseball cap and a sweatshirt, jeans, nobody recognized me. And I'm standing there, the lady in the front of that first class line, who was there by mistake, you know, but she was in first class, they just lined up in the wrong place. She looked over at me and said, sir, are you even in first class? And I just nodded, and I pointed to the sign above me, and I just nodded. And she said, well, the first class passengers are over here, so get to the back of this line. I didn't want to cause a scene, so I started walking to the back of the line. Who cares, man? I'm still in first class. I'm lucky enough to be here. I'm lucky enough to be flying in airplanes. This is a former migrant worker who used to shine shoes on the streets of San Antonio, right? So I'm walking, I didn't care. So yeah, okay, I'm sorry. I mean, I didn't say a word, but I walked to the back of the line. And on my way to the back of the line, she yelled out, the announcement was made in English. We speak English in America. And then finally, other people standing in line recognized me from the show, and they said, John, is this a What Would You Do scenario? I said, no, unfortunately, this is real life. And as I'm standing in the back of the line about to get on the plane, my only fear was that I was gonna have to sit next to this mean person on the airplane, right? God forbid that. And as I got on the plane, no, she was by herself, no surprise there. She was sitting by herself, and I couldn't resist. You know, Dr. Brown, I leaned over to her on my way, and I whispered on the way to my seat, I whispered to her, I said, ma'am, my name is John Quinones, and I do a TV show called What Would You Do? And you would be perfect for the show. You could play the part of the racist. She gave me another dirty look, and we proceeded on the plane. So, I mean, this stuff happens, and it happens all the time. Put yourselves in the shoes of the victim, and try to understand, and this will be a better world.
Right. Try to understand. That's a call to intentional presence and to witness.
Thank you.
I want to thank you for all that you've brought to our conversation today. And before we let you go, we want to invite a very special friend of the center to present you with something. Colleen Jennings-Rogenstock is our Vice President of Cultural Affairs here at ASU. She's
Wow.
Executive Director of ASU Gammage. Unfortunately, she could not be with us here in person, but given the power of technology, she has pre-recorded a message to you in which she will present the 2022 ASU Gammage Courage Award.
Oh my God, wow, thank you.
I'm Colleen Jennings-Rogenstock, Vice President of Cultural Affairs at Arizona State University and Executive Director of ASU Gammage. ASU Gammage recognizes that in our country, this is a time for second responders. The need for art and culture leaders to hear, heal, and help reunite this country. John Quinones, as an award-winning journalist, you have spoken and encouraged young people across this country. You've asked them not to worry about fame and fortune, but to focus on telling stories that can produce change. I quote you, giving a voice to people who don't have a voice, not only speaking to the movers and the shakers of the world, but to the moved and the shaken. Those are incredible guides to provide for our next group of generation of journalists. Telling those stories takes care, dedication, skill, talent, and courage. We thank you for making a difference, setting a standard, providing your shoulders for the next generation to stand on and move upward. And in receiving this award, you'll be joining your distinguished colleagues, such as Eric Holder, Viola Davis, Soledad O'Brien. John Quinones, ASU Gammage is proud to present to you the 2022 ASU Gammage Award of Courage. Thank you for all that you've done, all that you will do. Congratulations.
Wow. Wow.
So congratulations, John.
I am so humbled. Thank you. Thank you so much. And what great company I joined.
Absolutely.
Wonderful. Thank you. I am honored and humbled, and it's gonna sit in a very special place here in my home. Thank you.
Well, we look forward, hopefully, to getting a photo of you with your trophy. And I want to thank you so much for taking time to be this year's distinguished speaker. You are a person of courage and heart, of deep integrity and joy. There was mischievousness about you too, in the ways in which you think about the parameters of a story and then wonder what else is beyond that perimeter. So thank you for giving us hope. Thank you for moving us to tears. Thank you for being in places where others think there is no need to be. And you continue to tell us that the power of bearing witness bears fruit. So thank you for all of us here at the center, all of us at ASU, everyone online around this nation and around the world who's tuning in. You have given us so much encouragement and you've exhorted us, and we thank you deeply. Thank you so much. And we thank everyone for joining us. And we just thank you, John Quinones. You are a champion.
Thank you. Thank you. It's an honor and a privilege. God bless.
And to you as well.